Penguin, the Golden Throne failed a testament. They called me the Timekeeper. For 19 years, I had maintained the chronometric synchronization logs for the Astronomican Beacon relay on Terra itself. Referencing temporal fluctuations against approved variance thresholds, ensuring that the Emperor's light reached every corner of the Imperium with precise, measurable consistency. My work kept ships from drowning in the warp. My precision saved millions of souls daily. When the readings began to destabilize in ways that contradicted every doctrinal explanation I'd been taught, I thought I had discovered heretical sabotage. I thought I would be a hero. My name is Maris Kellan, 3rd Chronometrist of the Beacon Variance Division, and I want you to understand, I served the Golden Throne faithfully until the moment I understood what it truly was. By then it was already dying, and so was I. The chamber where I worked existed in a state of permanent twilight. Illuminated by the soft amber glow of chrono, displays that stretched across 3 walls like luminous scripture. The temperature was maintained at precisely 16 degrees Celsius, cold enough that my breath misted faintly when I exhaled, warm enough that my fingers could manipulate the brass adjustment dials without cramping. The air tasted of machine oil and ozone, the particular scent of ancient technology maintaining perfect function through millennia of constant operation. I had worked in this room for 7,312 days. I knew every scratch on the marble floor, every whir and click of the cogitator banks, every prayer, seal affixed to the bronze instrumentation panels by chronometrists who had served before me. My duties began each morning at the 4th hour, when the night shift surrendered their stations with ritual precision. I would receive the variance logs, compare them against baseline measurements established 10,000 years ago, and record any deviations exceeding 0.03% tolerance. In 19 years, I had logged 17,406 variances. All had fallen within acceptable parameters. All had explanations: solar flares, warp turbulence in the cicatrix maledictum, momentary power fluctuations in the vast machinery that sustained the Astronomican's psychic beacon. The Mechanicus priests taught that the Emperor's will was constant, but the material universe through which his light traveled was imperfect, prone to interference. My work cataloged those imperfections. My precision proved the Emperor's divine constancy against the chaos of reality. I took pride in this. Real pride. The kind that made my chest swell when I affixed my seal to each day's reports. I was part of something vast and holy, a single gear in the great mechanism that kept humanity alive across the darkness between stars. The other chronometrists and I would sometimes share our most interesting variance cases over midday meal, discussing them the way scholars might debate theological nuances. Marthin, who monitored the segmentum obscurus readings, once logged a fluctuation that formed a perfect sinusoidal wave, mathematical perfection emerging from quantum chaos. We'd called it the Emperor's signature, evidence of his conscious attention to our work. The priests blessed our instruments the following week. My station overlooked the Grand Chronometric Array, a cathedral-sized chamber where 300 chronometrists worked in synchronized silence, each monitoring their assigned sectors of the galaxy. The sound was a constant, gentle susurrus of quills on parchment, the soft tick of calibration dials being adjusted, the whisper of prayer as we worked. Every hour, on the hour, we would stand together and recite the litany of precision. By his light we measure. By his will we synchronize. By his constancy we endure. I believed every word. The litany wasn't empty ritual to me. It was acknowledgement of the mathematical miracle we served, the impossible truth that one being could generate psychic light sufficient to guide ships across an entire galaxy. I lived in a small dormitory 3 levels below the chronometric chambers, assigned by rank and seniority. The room contained a bed, a desk, a small shrine to the emperor with fresh candles replaced weekly, and a single window overlooking one of Terra's vast cathedral spires. I would wake to the sound of morning prayers echoing up from the basilica below, dress in my chronometrist's robes with their copper chronometer insignia, eat a small breakfast of reconstituted protein paste and recaf, and walk the 17 minutes to my station. The routine was comforting. Certainty was comforting. I knew my place in the cosmic mechanism, and that knowledge made the horror of the universe bearable. The other chronometrists were similarly devoted. We competed quietly for accuracy, took satisfaction in catching variances others might miss, treated our instruments with the reverence reserved for holy relics. Some of us were more social than others. I kept largely to myself, finding companionship in the precision of numbers rather than the uncertainty of human connection. But I respected my colleagues. I trusted them. When Marthan logged an unusual reading, I believed it was accurate. When Coordinator Vess approved our monthly reports, I believed she had reviewed them thoroughly. When the Mechanicus adepts performed their quarterly maintenance rituals, I believed they understood the ancient machinery better than anyone. This was the foundation of my existence: trust in the system, faith in the throne, belief that every person performing their duty created a bulwark against chaos. The first anomaly appeared on the morning of the 5th day, 9th month, in the year I would later understand was the Imperium's last. I arrived at my station to find the previous night's logs already reviewed and sealed, which was unusual but not unprecedented. Vess sometimes completed preliminary analysis if the night shift reported irregularities. I began my standard calibration procedures, adjusting the resonance crystals to account for diurnal magnetic variance, when I noticed something peculiar in the raw data stream. The Astronomican's output had fluctuated by 0.17% at exactly the 34th minute into the 8th hour. This was well above tolerance, yet the night shift had logged it as acceptable and moved on. I checked the reading 3 times. 0.17%. I verified the instruments, functioning perfectly. I reviewed the night shift's notes. A single line, variance within expected parameters, no action required. But 0.17% was not within expected parameters. It was nearly 6 times the acceptable threshold. Either the instruments had malfunctioned, the night shift had made an error, or the logged tolerance standards were wrong. All 3 possibilities were deeply unlikely. Our instruments were maintained by tech, priests of the cult Mechanicus. Our staff were trained for decades before assuming solo shifts. Our tolerance standards had been established by saints and scholars over 10 millennia of accumulated wisdom. I drafted a query to Coordinator Vess, carefully worded to avoid implying criticism. Esteemed Coordinator, I have observed a variance reading from the 8th hour that appears to exceed tolerance. I request clarification on proper logging protocols to ensure my understanding remains aligned with divisional standards. Respectful. Professional. The response arrived within the hour. Chronometrist Kellan. The reading in question falls within revised operational parameters. No further action required. Continue standard monitoring. Revised operational parameters. I had not been informed of any revision. I checked the monthly bulletin logs. Nothing. I searched the divisional archive. No revision notices in the past 3 years. Perhaps the revision was so recent, it hadn't been distributed yet. Perhaps Vess had received advance notice and was implementing it ahead of formal announcement. I told myself this made sense. The administratum worked in mysterious ways, vast bureaucratic wheels turning slowly but deliberately. I returned to my duties, filing the query exchange in my personal log, and watched the readings for the rest of my shift. The variance did not repeat. By evening prayers, I had almost convinced myself it was a singular event, an instrument hiccup already corrected by the Mechanicus's eternal vigilance. But the next morning, there were 3 readings above 0.15%. Different times, different sectors, all logged as acceptable by the night shift. I began a methodical review of the past month's logs, searching for similar anomalies I might have missed. I found 11 instances. 11 readings that exceeded tolerance, all marked as acceptable, all occurring during night shifts when I was not present. The pattern suggested this had been happening for at least 4 weeks, possibly longer. I felt an uncomfortable tension building in my chest, the sensation of certainty beginning to crack. I approached Marthin during our midday meal, choosing my words carefully. "Have you noticed any unusual variance readings recently? Anything above standard tolerance?" He looked at me oddly, fork pausing halfway to his mouth. "Wu had a few elevated readings last week, but Vess approved them. Revised operational parameters," she said. "Why?" I kept my expression neutral. Simple curiosity. "I want to ensure my calibrations align with current standards." He nodded slowly. "Vess distributed a memo about it. Should be in your message queue." There was no memo in my message queue. I checked twice. Either Marthin was mistaken, or I had been deliberately excluded from distribution. That night, I remained late after my shift ended, reviewing logs from other chronometrist stations while the evening staff worked nearby. I needed to understand the scope of this revision. When it had begun, what had triggered it? The archive terminals were accessible to all senior chronometrists, a necessary feature for cross-sector analysis when unusual patterns emerged. I queried the system for all variance readings above 0.1% over the past 6 months. The results made my hands go cold. 347 readings exceeded tolerance. All had been logged as acceptable. The frequency increased sharply starting 4 months ago, jumping from 2 or 3 per month to dozens per week. Current readings showed elevated variances occurring almost daily. And they weren't random fluctuations. They followed a pattern, a gentle but unmistakable escalation. The Astronomicon was becoming less stable, and everyone was pretending it wasn't happening. Or everyone except me had been told this was normal, that the Emperor's light was supposed to fluctuate this way. I printed the query results to parchment, a physical record I could study in my quarters. The printer's mechanical wheeze seemed impossibly loud in the quiet evening chamber. I folded the parchment carefully, slipped it into my robe, and left the archive terminal exactly as I'd found it. Walking back through the chronometric cathedral felt different now. The synchronized prayers sounded hollow. The amber glow of the displays looked sickly rather than warm. I had spent 19 years measuring the Emperor's light, and suddenly I was afraid to look at the readings too closely, terrified of what I might see. In my dormitory, I spread the parchment across my desk and studied it by candlelight. 347 anomalies. I traced the pattern with my finger, watching the numbers climb. 0.08, 0.09, 0.12, 0.15, 0.17. Each reading slightly higher than the last, a steady deterioration masked as acceptable variance. If this pattern continued, we would breach 0.25% within weeks. I had no idea what would happen at 0.25%. We had no documentation for variance that severe. The theoretical models simply didn't account for it. The Astronomicon was supposed to be constant, sustained by the Emperor's eternal will. Deterioration implied limitation. Limitation implied mortality. I prayed that night with desperate intensity, begging the Emperor for clarity, for understanding, for reassurance that my growing fear was faithless paranoia rather than justified concern. The candle flames flickered in the darkness, and no revelation came. Only silence and the cold realization that I had two choices: trust that my superiors understood something I didn't, or trust the evidence my own hands had compiled. Both options terrified me. Trust meant accepting I was wrong, that my training and instincts had failed. Doubt meant questioning the foundation of everything I'd built my life around. I chose doubt. Not because I wanted to, but because the numbers wouldn't let me do otherwise. The next morning, I requested a meeting with Coordinator Vess, invoking the formal review protocol that allowed chronometrists to raise concerns about systematic anomalies. She granted me 10 minutes at the day's 14th hour. I arrived precisely on time, carrying my compiled parchments in a sealed folder, marked with my chronometer seal. Her office was a small chamber adjacent to the main cathedral, walls lined with ancient technical manuals and commendation scrolls from centuries of faithful service. She was an older woman, perhaps 60 standard years, with iron, gray hair pulled back severely and augmetic spectacles that glowed faintly amber when she focused on documents. She gestured for me to sit. "Chronometrist Kellan, your request mentioned systematic anomalies. Please elaborate." Her voice was professional, neither warm nor cold. The tone of someone who had conducted thousands of these meetings and knew the outcome before they began. I placed my folder on her desk, keeping my hands steady through force of will. "Coordinator, I've compiled variance data over the past 6 months. The readings show an escalating pattern of fluctuations exceeding established tolerances. I'm concerned we may be experiencing instrumental failure, or that our calibration standards require review." She opened the folder, scanned the first page, and closed it. She did not look at the rest. These readings fall within revised operational parameters issued by the Adeptus Mechanicus 4 months ago. The revision was distributed to all senior staff. I felt my stomach clench. "Coordinator, I received no such distribution. My message queue contains no memo regarding parameter revision." She looked at me for a long moment, her augmetic spectacles clicking and whirring as they focused. "Then, I will ensure you receive a copy today. The revised parameters account for anticipated fluctuations related to the throne's increased operational demands during the current crusade. Your concern is noted and appreciated, but no further action is required. May I ask what operational demands would cause variance to increase by 200% over baseline?" The question emerged before I could stop it, sharper than intended. Her expression didn't change, but something in her posture shifted, a subtle stiffening. "You may not. That information is classified at departmental director level and above. Your duty is to monitor and log, chronometrist. Interpretation and policy are outside your purview." She stood, indicating the meeting was concluded. "You have served with distinction for 19 years. Don't compromise that record with excessive curiosity. Trust in the system. Trust in the throne." I took my folder and left, my hands trembling slightly as I walked back to my station. Trust in the system. Trust in the throne. The words rang hollow now, a command rather than comfort. I had trusted. I had believed. And that belief was being weaponized against me, used to silence legitimate concern. The revised parameters existed, apparently. But I had been excluded from distribution, deliberately or through error. And what operational demands could cause the Emperor's light to falter? He was a god, sustained by 1,000 psychic sacrifices daily, maintained by technology built by hands that touched divinity. Gods didn't have operational demands. Gods were constant. Unless they weren't gods at all. The thought arrived like a knife between my ribs, cold and precise and utterly heretical. I forced it away, recited the litany of precision 3 times under my breath, focused on my instruments. But the thought had been born, and thoughts like that don't die easily. They grow in darkness, fed by unanswered questions and unexplained inconsistencies. I watched the readings for the rest of my shift with new eyes, seeing not divine constancy, but mechanical strain, not eternal will but failing systems, desperately maintained by people who wouldn't admit what was happening. That evening I returned to the archives, this time searching not for variance readings, but for maintenance logs. The Mechanicus performed quarterly reviews of the Astronomican's relay systems, checking everything from crystal resonance to psychic amplification matrices. If the system was failing, maintenance logs would show it. Increased repair frequencies, component replacements, emergency interventions. I found the logs easily enough. They were marked confidential, but not restricted, accessible to senior chronometrists who might need technical context for unusual readings. I started reading at the 18th hour and didn't stop until the 3rd hour of morning. What I found turned my doubt into something sharper and more terrible. The maintenance logs showed 43 emergency interventions in the past 6 months. 43 times that Mechanicus adepts had been summoned to address critical failures in the relay systems. Crystal resonators cracked and replaced. Amplification matrices burning out weeks after installation. Psychic shielding degrading faster than models predicted. And in the marginalia, written in the cramped hand of a tech, priest named Maris Kellan, a single repeated phrase. Source instability increasing. Recommend immediate investigation of primary throne function. Primary throne function. The golden throne itself. Not the relay systems we monitored, but the throne that powered them. The arcane machinery that sustained the Emperor's psychic might and kept his light burning across the galaxy. The logs suggested something was failing at the source, and we were seeing the downstream effects in our variance readings. But if the throne was failing, why were we being told to accept the deterioration as normal? Why revise our tolerances upward instead of addressing the root cause? I found Maris Kellan's final report, dated 2 months prior. It was marked for departmental director review only, but someone had misfiled it in the general archive, or perhaps deliberately left it accessible for those willing to look. The language was technical, dense with machine, cant, and religious formulae, but the conclusion was devastatingly clear. All diagnostic evidence suggests primary power source experiencing progressive decay. Current failure rate projects critical threshold within 6 to 8 months. Immediate intervention required to prevent catastrophic containment breach. Recommend full throne maintenance suspension and comprehensive system analysis. 8 months. The report was 2 months old. 6 months remained. 6 months until catastrophic containment breach, whatever that meant. And instead of intervention, we had revised our operational parameters, taught ourselves to accept readings that would have triggered emergency protocols a year ago. Instead of investigating, we had normalized the failure, made it acceptable, made it routine. I sat in the archive darkness, holding parchment that proved the Golden Throne was dying, and felt something break inside me that I hadn't known could break. Not my faith in the Emperor. Not yet. My faith in the system that claimed to serve him. The realization that the people responsible for maintaining humanity's survival were choosing ignorance over action, choosing comfortable lies over terrifying truth. Someone had received Maris Kellan's report. Someone with authority and resources, and they had done nothing except tell us to accept higher variance as normal. The question that haunted me then, sitting alone in the amber glow of ancient cogitators, was simple and terrible: why? Why would anyone let the throne fail when preventing that failure was their sacred duty? What purpose did inaction serve? What calculation had been made that weighed the emperor's life against some other consideration and found his life wanting? I returned to my dormitory as morning prayers began, the distant chanting a reminder that thousands of people lived and worked in faith, never questioning, never doubting. I had been one of them yesterday morning. Now I was something else. Someone who had seen behind the curtain of official certainty and found only frightened bureaucrats making decisions they couldn't justify. I still believed in the emperor, but I no longer believed in the people who claimed to serve him. Sleep was impossible. I lay in my bed, watching dawn light creep across the ceiling, and made a decision that would define everything that followed. I would continue monitoring the readings. I would document the deterioration. And when the moment came, when the evidence became undeniable, even to those committed to denying it, I would present my findings and demand action. I would be the voice of truth in a system built on comfortable illusions. I would save the throne, save the emperor, save the Imperium. I believed I could be a hero. The thought makes me want to weep now, here in the darkness where I wait for death. I was so certain, so naive. I didn't understand yet that the system wasn't failing to see the crisis. The system was choosing to ignore it, and there are no heroes in a system built on deliberate blindness. Only witnesses and martyrs, and the silence after both are gone. The readings worsened. 0.18, 0.20, 0.23. I logged them all meticulously, cross-referenced them against maintenance reports, built a comprehensive timeline of deterioration. Other chronometrists began noticing the pattern, asking quiet questions during meals. The atmosphere in the cathedral grew tense, the synchronized prayers taking on a desperate edge. We were servants of precision, trained to see patterns, and the pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. Something was wrong, something fundamental, and we were being told to pretend otherwise. Marthan approached me 3 weeks after my meeting with Vess. His face was drawn, exhausted, the look of someone who hadn't slept properly in days. I need to show you something. Tonight, after your shift. Archive Terminal 7. Come alone. He walked away before I could respond, disappearing into the cathedral's amber twilight. I felt my pulse quicken. Others were investigating. Others had found something. Perhaps together we could force the issue, demand accountability, insist on intervention. That night I met him as instructed. He was already at the terminal when I arrived, hunched over a display showing what looked like personnel records. He glanced up as I approached, gestured for me to sit. I found the distribution list for Vess's revised operational parameters memo. Read it. I scanned the list of names. 73 chronometrists. My name wasn't on it. Neither was Marthan's. Neither were 6 others I recognized as the most experienced senior staff, people who had served 20 years or more. The memo had been distributed to everyone except those most likely to question it. That's not all, Marthan said, his voice low and urgent. I accessed the personnel files for the names that are on the list. 23 of them were hired in the past 6 months. They have no prior experience, minimal training, but they're being promoted rapidly, given senior station assignments usually reserved for decade-plus veterans. Someone is replacing us, Maris. Systematically. With people who don't know enough to recognize what they're seeing. The implications crystallized with terrible clarity. This wasn't ignorance. This was orchestrated. A deliberate replacement of experienced chronometrists with inexperienced ones, who would accept what they were told without question. The system wasn't failing to respond to the crisis. The system was managing the crisis by ensuring the people monitoring it didn't understand what they were monitoring. And that meant someone at high levels knew exactly what was happening and had decided that awareness was more dangerous than ignorance. "Have you shown this to anyone?" I asked. Marthan shook his head. "I don't know who to trust. Vess obviously knows. Maybe the entire coordination staff knows. Maybe it goes higher. The Administratum, the Mechanicus. Maybe even the Inquisition." His hands were shaking. "Maris, what if this is intentional? What if they're letting the throne fail? That's insane. Why would anyone let the throne fail? The Astronomicon guides every Imperial ship. Without it, the Imperium collapses. Interstellar travel becomes impossible. Every world becomes isolated." But even as I said it, I remembered Maris Kellan's report. Recommend immediate intervention. The recommendation had been ignored. Not through incompetence, but through choice. Someone had decided intervention wasn't worth the cost, wasn't worth the risk, wasn't worth whatever consequence they feared more than the throne's failure. "Maybe collapse is the point," Marthan whispered. "Maybe someone wants it to fail. Chaos cults, traitor infiltrators, I don't know. Or maybe..." He hesitated, the words clearly difficult to speak. "Maybe it's already failed. Maybe what we're seeing is just the aftermath, and they're trying to control how long it takes for everyone to realize." The archive was very quiet. Just the hum of cogitators. The distant sound of footsteps in the cathedral beyond. I looked at the personnel records, at the systematic replacement of knowledge with ignorance, and felt the last foundations of my certainty crumble. Marthan was right. This was intentional, but I didn't think it was sabotage. Saboteurs would accelerate the crisis. This was something else. This was management. Someone was managing the throne's death, controlling the narrative, ensuring that when Catastrophic came, it would come to a population that had been carefully conditioned not to see it coming. "We need to go higher," I said. "Past Vess, past the department. The High Lords need to know. Someone with authority to actually intervene." Marthan looked at me with exhausted eyes. "And if the High Lords already know? If this is coming from the top, then we're not whistleblowers, Maris. We're heretics exposing sacred truth. They'll kill us for this. Then we die knowing we tried." The word sounded braver than I felt. But what choice did we have? Stay silent and watch the Imperium burn. Accept our comfortable positions as witnesses to apocalypse. I had taken an oath when I assumed this role. By his light we measure. By his will we synchronize. By his constancy we endure. That oath meant something. Even if no one else remembered. We compiled everything. Variance logs, maintenance reports, personnel records, Maris Kellan's warning. 300 pages of evidence proving systematic deception and deliberate inaction in the face of existential crisis. We sealed it in a departmental director, level document cylinder, marked it for High Lord review, and submitted it through official channels with both our seals affixed. The proper way. The respectful way. We were not rebels. We were faithful servants reporting a crisis. We believed in the system's capacity for correction. The next morning, Coordinator Vess summoned us both. The meeting room was larger this time, and she wasn't alone. An inquisitorial agent stood against the wall, power armor gleaming in the amber light. His expression, hidden behind a skull-faced helmet. A Mechanicus Magos waited in the corner, brass robes clicking softly, with embedded mechanisms, augmetic eyes glowing red, and seated at the table's head was someone I recognized from portraits. High Administratum Lord Hester Thane, one of the 7 individuals who managed Terra's vast bureaucratic machinery. Vess gestured for us to sit. We did, though Marthan's hands were shaking badly enough that he had to clasp them in his lap. Lord Thane opened the document cylinder, scanned the first few pages of our report, and set them aside. He looked at us with eyes that had seen centuries of service. Tired eyes, ancient eyes. Chronometrist Kellan. Chronometrist Brame. You have compiled evidence of systematic tolerance revision and personnel management decisions you believe constitute dereliction of duty. Is this accurate? Yes, Lord, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The variance data proves the Astronomicon is failing. The maintenance logs confirm progressive decay of the Golden Throne systems, and the personnel records demonstrate deliberate suppression of senior chronometrists, most likely to recognize these patterns. We request immediate intervention before the crisis becomes irreversible. Lord Thane nodded slowly. He looked very tired. Your analysis is correct. Every word of it. The throne is failing, has been failing for months. The Mechanicus estimates 6 weeks until catastrophic containment breach, possibly less. You have successfully identified a crisis that threatens every human world in the galaxy. He paused. Now I will tell you why we're doing nothing about it. The words didn't make sense. Couldn't make sense. We had proven the crisis. He acknowledged it. Now he would tell us why nothing was being done. Marthan found his voice first. Lord, I don't understand. If you know the throne is failing, why not repair it? Why not evacuate Terra? Why not prepare the Imperium for what's coming? Because we can't repair it, the Magos said, his voice a grinding mechanical rasp. The throne systems are 10,000 years old. They were built by the Emperor himself, using technology we no longer understand. We've spent centuries studying it, trying to comprehend even a fraction of its function. When components fail, we replace them with inferior substitutes. When systems degrade, we pray to machine spirits and hope for compliance. We are children playing with a weapon we inherited from giants, and now that weapon is killing the one person who understood how to wield it. Then transfer him to a new throne, I said desperately. Build a replacement. Copy the technology. The Magos's augmetic eyes brightened, which I later understood meant amusement. Transfer him. He cannot be moved. He is fused to the throne, has been for 10,000 years. His body is gone, rotted away beneath golden machinery and psychic preservation fields. What remains is consciousness sustained by technology and willpower. Remove him from the throne and he dies instantly. Build a replacement. With what knowledge? What blueprints? The Emperor left none. His genius died with him, and we've been pretending we could maintain his work through faith and ignorance. Lord Thane stood, walked to the window overlooking the cathedral spire. Evacuate Terra. Where? There are 40 billion souls on the throne world. The ships don't exist to move them, and the worlds don't exist to receive them. Prepare the Imperium. How? Tell a million worlds that their god is dying, and hope they respond with calm acceptance rather than panic, rebellion, and civil war. We've run the models, Chronometrist. Full disclosure causes more damage than controlled collapse. Controlled collapse. I repeated, the words tasting like ash. You're managing the Emperor's death. You're choosing how fast he dies, how many people know, how the crisis unfolds. Lord Thane turned back to us, and I saw genuine pain in his ancient eyes. We are choosing the manner of apocalypse. The apocalypse itself is inevitable. We've known for months. The question we face daily is not how to prevent it, but how to prevent it from being even worse. The inquisitorial agent spoke for the first time, voice distorted by Vox Grill. Imagine we announce the truth today. Every navigator learns the Astronomicon is failing. What happens? They refuse to enter the warp. Trade collapses. Forge worlds stop shipping weapons. Agricultural worlds stop exporting food. Entire sectors starve within months. Then imagine every planetary governor learns Terra is dying. How many declare independence? How many form their own kingdoms? How many invite Xenos alliance rather than stand alone? The Imperium fragments into 1,000 warring states, each fighting for survival. That's optimistic. Pessimistic models show immediate warp incursion, demonic manifestation, and civilizational extinction within a decade. So instead you're killing him slowly, Marthan said, voice breaking, revising our tolerances so we don't notice, replacing experienced staff with ignorant ones, ensuring that when the containment breach happens, it happens to an Imperium that never saw it coming. He stood abruptly, chair scraping against marble. That's not mercy. That's murder. You're murdering him to maintain your power. Lord Thane's fist struck the table, sudden violence from the exhausted bureaucrat. Power. What power survives the throne's death? We are signing our own execution warrants, boy. The moment that containment fails, Terra becomes a warp rift. 40 billion souls consumed by the breach. The Astronomicon goes dark. Every ship in transit is lost. Every world defended by psychers loses their minds to chaos. I will die in this room, at this desk, trying to keep one more sector supplied for one more day. My power dies with the light. He sat back down, suddenly looking every one of his centuries. We are not villains. We are not monsters. We are exhausted people making impossible choices. The throne is dying. We cannot stop it. So we choose to let it die slowly, buying time for sectors to stockpile resources, for forge worlds to distribute weapons, for military assets to deploy to defensible positions. We are preparing the Imperium for civil war without telling them that's what we're doing. And yes, that requires lying. It requires suppressing truth. It requires silencing people like you who see what's happening and want to sound the alarm. You think you can manage apocalypse, I said quietly. Control how fast everything burns. But you're wrong. The moment the throne fails, everything fails. No amount of preparation stops that. The Magos made that mechanical grinding sound again. Incorrect. Preparation determines whether the Imperium survives in some form or perishes completely. 10 well-supplied worlds with stable governments and military assets might endure the long night and rebuild eventually. A million panicked worlds descending into civil war will not. We are not trying to save the Imperium as it exists. We are trying to ensure something survives. The inquisitorial agent moved closer, power armor humming. The question before us now is what to do with you. You know what you cannot be allowed to know. You have compiled evidence that would shatter faith across Terra if discovered. And you are chronometrists, trained to notice patterns, capable of continuing investigation despite warnings. We have 3 options. Execute you as heretics and add your names to the martyrology. Mind wipe you and reassign you to duties where you'll never access classified information again. Or recruit you. Recruit us for what? Marthan's voice was hollow, shock finally settling in. Recruit you to help manage the crisis, Lord Thane said. We need people who can see the truth and function anyway. People who can monitor the throne's decay and prepare response protocols without breaking. People who understand what we're trying to do, even if they hate it. You've proven you're those people, so we're offering you a choice. Join us in bearing this burden, or we ensure you can't spread what you know. I looked at the documents on the table, 300 pages of evidence proving the crisis. I looked at the Inquisitor's bolt pistol, weapon that could erase us faster than thought. I looked at Marthan, saw my own horror reflected in his expression, and I understood then what Lord Thane meant. This wasn't an offer. It was a trap. Accept and become complicit in the managed death of everything we believed in. Refuse and die, or worse, become mindless servitors processing data we could no longer comprehend. There was no third option. No heroic escape. No righteous resistance. You're asking us to help kill him, I said. To participate in the deception. To watch the readings climb and tell people it's normal. Help them accept the unacceptable. Manage their awareness so they don't panic at the wrong time. Lord Thane met my eyes. Yes, I am asking you to become what we are, complicit, guilty, burdened with knowledge that makes every day an exercise in controlled despair. I am asking you to sacrifice your innocence so that we can buy a few more months of stability. It is a terrible thing to ask. I would not ask it if I saw another path. And if we refuse, Lord Thee,